Our test is next Tuesday on chapters 6, 7, and 8. It's our test 3. It's probably the shortest test that we've had. So when you get the test and you see a huge journal page, that doesn't mean that those journal pages have to be full. All right? There are 5 transactions that I want us to go over, and I'll show you an example of those. And that's all you really need to know for the payroll. I will give you the percents, I'll give you the wage base, and I will give you new numbers for each one of the things that I want you to do. So if your payroll register isn't correct, your journal entries aren't coming from that payroll register that you completed on the test. Okay, so I'll give you new numbers. I don't want those errors to carry from one part of the test to the other part. It is on 6, 7, and 8, so this is the review sheet that I gave you, I think the second day of class. Look at the vocabulary. Look at the steps in reconciling a bank statement. Remember, we want the checkbook and we want what the bank says that we have to equal. So your 2 numbers at the bottom of that reconciliation form should equal. We're going to journalize some transactions from that bank statement. If the bank collected a note for us, if we had a service charge, if we had a return check. Remember to write a description and leave a blank line on those journal entries. If we're not posting those journal entries, should we have account numbers in the post-reference column?
No.
Thank you. Okay. Then we're going to go down to this step. We're going to have a payroll register to complete. I'll give you the percentages. I'll give you the wage base. I'll give you what everybody's earning. I'm going to give you either a single or a married federal income tax chart for you to look at those numbers. When you're doing the payroll, always double check your numbers before you total that payroll register. As I said, some of your papers for 8 were perfect. I graded one yesterday from an online student, and she was off a penny on one of those numbers. Well, that throws off the total on your column. So that's going to be a point off for that column total. So when you're rounding, make sure that you're rounding. If it's 5 or more, it has to go up. Cents are only 2 places, remember? Can't be 3. So just be careful that we just round correctly. So double check your numbers before you do your totals. On the payroll register, you'll have the FICA, Social Security, OASDI, the Medicare, the SUTA, the FUTA, the medical insurance if there is insurance, the federal income tax, and then do your totals. I made a couple notes on your homework to put your ruling, the single line to indicate that you added, and then the double line that it's the totals. Use your name tag, use your straight edge, use your ID card. I don't care what you use, but make sure those lines are straight. Then we're going to look at journalizing the transaction to record the payroll, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Journalize the transaction to record the employer's share of the payroll taxes, and then know where those normal balances are for your accounts. You'll never get away from that. If you didn't memorize that in chapters 1 and 2, you need to go back to that, because when we work in Peachtree for Atlas and Zelle, didn't you have to know which account was the debit and which was the credit? And you'll see it more when you do Zelle than you did when you did Atlas. Those transactions were kind of easy in Atlas, but when we get to Zelle, you have to know those debits and credits. We increase an account on the normal balance side, we decrease an account opposite the normal balance, and cash is the A number 1 account that you really should know. We increase it, it's a debit. We decrease it, it's a credit. The transactions that you'll see when we do the payroll, the first one is to record the payroll. Where do the numbers come from for that transaction? The payroll register. And this one is for the employees, isn't it? It's everything that was on the payroll register. It is this transaction right here. The last two columns on the payroll register, and I think there's two on the test. This could just be one if we only had office people. If we just had plant wages, we could just have one. But usually we have two. We have a wages and we have a salaries, workers that work within our company. So we usually have two there. These numbers are the gross amount. Okay, that's what we put in the last two columns on the payroll register because that's the amount we want to expense. This is everything that we withheld from the payroll register. And we had the OASDI, we had the Medicare, we had the federal income tax, you might have state income tax. Here we had union dues, we could have health insurance, we could have a number of items that we've withheld from the paycheck. These are the deductions. This number represents the net. Now this one has the word payable after it because that's what we have to pay to our employees. Everything that we withheld, those have the word payable because we've collected it, we've held it from our employees, but we haven't paid it yet. So they are liabilities. And then the first two accounts that are the debits are going to be your expenses, and those have the debit balance. Right? So these two are your gross, and I know for sure I'm going to have somebody write gross on there instead of what the account is. It's the expense account. Everything else has the word payable. Don't forget to write that word payable. And then this amount represents the net. The description, record the payroll from the payroll register. You could put a date on there if you wanted to. Just be detailed in what description you put on there.
So you add those and you subtract that amount, the expenses amount, right?
Well, all of these numbers come from the payroll register.
Yes.
But all of your credits added together should equal your debits added together. So double check that before you go to the next one. Make sure that they equal. Make sure that you have that the debits and credits equal. And we do get into some cents when we're working with the payroll because we used percentages. So it does come out to where we have cents. So that is transaction number one. Record the payroll. That is the employees. If I ask you to record the entry for the payroll taxes, that is what the employer is responsible for. That is this transaction right here that says A3. The employer is responsible for matching the OASDI and matching the Medicare. If we looked at the T account for these two accounts, we would have this same number posted to it on the credit side twice. One to record the payroll, one to record the payroll taxes. Remember my story about the school districts in San Antonio. They do not withhold the OASDI. They have to withhold the Medicare, but this is a huge expense for employers. They have to match it.
Which is why it's doubled in there, right?
It's doubled when we make the payment. Right? right, so this transaction is to record the payroll taxes. It record the employee's payroll taxes, and who is responsible for this? The employer, okay? The SUDA and the FUDA, we had numbers, and we also had a special column on Billy's to use that amount to calculate the taxable amount that we're going to use to get that number. I have to give you the percent. I'm not going to ask you to memorize that. So use the percent that I gave you for the SUDA and the FUDA. Employees do not pay that, only employers. So that's transaction 2. Record the payroll taxes. Have we used cash at all in those first 2? No. We're just recording it. Have we posted that, those 2 transactions? Okay. All right. The next one, number 3, that's the one that is not in the book, but you're doing it in Billy's. Most businesses have a separate checking account that is just for the payroll. So we're just transferring the money from our regular checking account, cash, to the payroll. It could be payroll checking, it could be payroll cash. Just look at my chart of accounts to see what it is, and we're just transferring those funds. A credit to our regular cash, a debit to our payroll cash. And the description would be transfer the funds for the payroll for whatever period it is. Oh, don't forget your descriptions. The 4th one is to pay the payroll. I don't have an example of that transaction either, but what would be our debit when we're paying the payroll?
Wages and salaries payable.
This amount right here. Wages and salaries payable. And our credit would be,
Cash.
Payroll.
and it's not the
Cash.
regular cash, it's the payroll cash. Right, so that's transaction 4. I think when we break the payroll down to just these 5 basic transactions, it's really not that difficult. You did all the hard work when you did the payroll register, where you had to do the percents and all that calculating and your totals. Recording it isn't too bad.
Can you go back to that shot?
Which, this one?
The top one. So these this one right here, if I add these, and I add these, and I subtract them, I should come up with that. No.
Yes.
Alright, that was my last
If
one.
you added these and subtracted it from this one, it would equal this number. I mean, you can do it multiple ways, but where is this number on the payroll register?
At the end.
No, it's not the last 2 columns. That's these numbers. What is this number right
Next to
here?
the
Right before the check.
That's the net. And we have a column for that says net. All of these numbers were on the payroll register. All of them. And remember, we always want to have the debits and credits equal. So when you think this is the total amount that our employees earned, this is everything that we withheld, this is what we're writing the checks for. We have to expense the total amount. If we don't, what happens to these payables? Then we're just paying those out of our money. And it's really not our money because we withheld it from our employees. The last one is to pay the payroll taxes. Here's where we have cash. We can pay the federal income tax, which ones did they combine for us that we paid?
FICA.
The FICA, the Medicare, the federal income tax. We can pay those 3 together. The FUDA and the SUDA, I would keep those separate. And on Billy's Market, you didn't have to pay the FUDA. I think you paid the SUDA. Just read my directions. If you paid the FUDA, that's okay too. It just changes your balance in your cash. But it's still something we have to pay eventually. But it wasn't something that we had to pay monthly. Would it be wrong if you paid it monthly? No, it's not wrong. But if you don't have to pay it right away, it's just like having too many withholdings from your paycheck, then the government's using your money before it's actually due. Here's the last transaction, and this is the check that we can write to the federal government, or it's probably an electronic funds transfer. It's not actually a check. These two amounts, they're double what we withheld from the payroll register. Because if you looked at your T account, we have this amount posted once, and then we have it posted twice. Employee, employer. Now, I probably won't have you post on the test, so if you're not posting, you might have to just do your T account so that you know, or add those two. You know when you're paying it, it has to be double the amount for the OASDI and the Medicare. So let's go back and look at the transactions. If I'm asking you on the test to record the payroll taxes, which transaction is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5?
To record what?
The payroll taxes. 2. To pay the payroll taxes.
5.
5. To pay the payroll.
4.
To transfer the funds. And to record the payroll. 1. I'm going to give you a huge journal page on the test. Doesn't mean it has to be full. If we were recording this first one, how many lines did we use? Just 9. So you're going to be looking at that journal saying, I know she wants a little more. I asked you to record the payroll. It's not going to take up the whole page. If you're working through Billy's, if you work through Chapter 8, you're going to think that this test is the easiest one that we've had. On the hardest chapters that we've had so far.
So now if you know chapter 8 really good, should be good.
I think you'll be fine on the test.
I did most of the.
Yesterday in one of our sessions that we had to take, the lady was, I don't even know what her credentials were, but she talked about the 1-minute paper that I have you all write, and she said that that is such a good thing for students to do when you finish with teaching a new concept. And then you should sleep on it and not think about it again until you wake up the next day, that your brain processes. And remember, I've told you, if you're trying to get ready for your test or a new concept, look at it right before you go to bed. Your brain processes it at night. She also said that before we take the test, that we should do a 1 minute of relaxation, whether that's just to close your eyes, take a deep breath, exhale, just to do a cleansing breath before you start the test. So on Tuesday, if I happen to be in my Stephen Covey class and Barbara Dean is in here giving you the test, do that. Take a deep breath. I mean, how nervous are you when the test gets passed out? Nervous. I know you are. But if you have studied, if you have completed Billy's, if you have worked through the assignments, you know this. So don't panic. Okay? any specific questions that you have about the payroll.
Robert, is there gonna be a form, the 941?
Yeah.
Did we go over that already?
But that's, if you'll just read the directions on the form, it's not that hard. And you know what? I don't know that there is one on the test.
Yes.
There's one on Billy's,
Yeah,
Oh, that-
there was one of them.
Not on the test?
but I don't think, I'll have to go back and look at the test. I'll look while you are working on Allison's elf,
Yes.
okay? There might not be one on the test,
There shouldn't be one.
okay?
Just playing. I always get messed up with the little cent.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, that stupid
Well,
cent.
and see, with the cents, usually when you're doing an income tax or a government form, you don't include the cents. Because how many of those were off? 3 cents, 5 cents, one was off 7 cents, and that's just kind of a pain to do. So we don't usually include the cents. Good question, but I'll go down there and look at the test. I made the copies, but I didn't really look at it, and I didn't bring a copy of it in here. All right, if we don't have any questions, I'll stop the recording.